So I gotta tell you, I am extremely frustrated this week, and I'm gonna need your help. Really, seriously, I'm going to need your help. So what I want you to do, once we get into all of this, is I want you to call me, 407-916-5400, or text to 23680. You can also comment on Facebook Live as well. You can comment on the app as well. And tell me what the solution is to all of this. Because I frankly don't know. And I frankly don't understand it. I really don't. I have never been more... This issue, and you all know the issue I'm talking about this week. This issue of police shootings, of riots in cities, of what's called racial profiling, institutional racism, this divide by race in this country. What's the solution here? Because frankly, I understand both sides, and I think it is both sides. And until we figure out how to come together and address both sides of this issue, nothing's ever going to change. But I'm watching, by the way, if you're wondering who this is, I am Michael Yaffee, and this is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. The world this week has been beyond reason. What's happened in some cities in this country has been beyond reason. And frankly, a lot of times I don't understand it. Because, and what really struck me this week especially, is I'm looking at the riots in Charlotte. I'm looking at video of the riots in Charlotte. You know what I see? The police force is almost just as diverse, if not just as diverse, as the rioters. The people protesting and rioting, a lot of them were white. So you had blacks and whites doing it. And then I look at the police force, and a lot of the police force is black. So what's happening here? Is this really all about race then? Because when I see that, I'm thinking this is something different here now. This is no longer about race. It can't be. Because you're telling me that in a city where half the cops, I'm not sure the exact statistic, but a lot of the cops are black, you're telling me that they are victims of institutional racism as well, that they target blacks as well because of racism? That is so hard for me to believe, that they've been taught to be racist against their own race. So what's happening here? I want your take on this. I want to know the solution on this. I want to know how in the world can we stop racial politics dealing with this? Because frankly, I don't understand it. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We're going to get to the family of the person shot in Charlotte. They released the cell phone video, the wife. You hear talking. And they've released the video, and we're going to play the audio of that video. Now, the video doesn't answer everything because, frankly, you don't see when the person was shot. You don't see it, but you hear it. And you hear a lot of what's going on. But there are some facts that we do know, just from listening and watching to this video. The cops repeatedly tell him to put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Even his wife is yelling at him, saying, "Get out of the car. What are you doing, Keith? Don't do it. Don't do it." And you'll hear it in a sec. Not only that, but earlier this week, they released a photo, a snapshot from the video that showed that he was armed, that he had a gun next to him. They found the gun. You see it in the video. You see the gun next to him after they shot him in the video. And one of the cops that was there, who they say shot him, was black. You're telling me now, they're telling me, did he plant the gun? Now, this is what we're going to now? The police chief is black. So he also believes in this institutional racism? What is happening here? What is the solution here? Because I don't understand this. On both sides, I don't get it. But here is the audio from that shooting.
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He has no weapon. He has no weapon. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything. He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys. He just took his medicine. Keith, don't let them break the windows. Come on out the car. Keith, don't do it. Keith, get out the car. Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it. Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? He better not be dead. He better not be dead. I know that much. I know that much. He better not be dead. I'm not going to come near you. I'm going to record, though. I'm not coming near you. I'm going to record, though. He better be alive, because I'm coming. You better be alive. How about that? Yes, we're here over here at 9453 Lexington Court. These are the police officers that shot my husband, and he better live. He better live, because he didn't do nothing to them. He good. Ain't nobody touch nobody, so they all good. I know he better live. I know he better live.
So there you go. And obviously she's upset. Nobody wants to see their husband shot. But what do we hear here? Now, she yells at one point, he doesn't have a gun. But he had an ankle holster, and you see the gun at the end of the video. It'd be very hard to just plant that all of a sudden. But you hear the cops repeatedly. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. And you don't just hear one. You hear the other cops. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Now, people are saying, well, why did the cops approach him to begin with? Well, there was another investigation going on. He matched a description. And he wasn't the guy, but they approached him. Just like any investigation, you question people of interest. Happens to whites just as much as blacks. And you see the video. And I pointed out on the morning show this morning that I don't think we need to release the video. We need to release the video. It'll stop the riots. I don't think facts matter in any of this. I really don't. Because I can tell you facts, and I'll tell my black friends facts. That this whole idea of cops murdering blacks, statistically, is not a problem. It's not an epidemic. But that doesn't matter. And this all started, and by the way, this all started with the Michael Brown thing, which was proven to be a lie. But not only that, but we heard hands up, don't shoot. And we heard this is a problem of unarmed black men being shot by cops. But the last few instances, the black man who has been shot and killed has been armed. The Washington Post had a study, and we're going to address that more later in the show, had a study where overwhelmingly, when someone is shot by a cop, and when a black person is shot, overwhelmingly the person is armed. Now, is this a police training issue? Should the police not be so easy to fire a gun? Maybe. This is why I want solutions from you, the audience, to call me and text me. Is this about police training? Is this about institutional racism? Is this about the problem in the black community? Or is this all just perception and politics? There is word now that 70%, I saw Fox headline on this morning, that something like 70% of the people arrested in Charlotte during the riots weren't even from Charlotte. So what's happening? Or is there an element of truth to all of this? Is there an element of truth to all of this? Because I really want solutions, and I feel like we're not listening to each other. Really. I feel like and you know, we had the Dallas police chief who was hailed as a true leader. and after the cops in Dallas were shot down by a black person who was upset, he said, be a part of the solution. Join the police force yourself if you have a problem. But you look at Charlotte, and a lot of blacks are in the police force. And then you talk to a lot of blacks about this problem, and they'll say, well, black cops are more of a problem than white cops, and black cops are even more racist against blacks out there. What? Why? If that is true, then racism is not the issue here. Because if a black person looks at black people they approach differently, it's either a problem of training, or what is it? It can't be racism, because you can't tell me that that black cop is against his own race. That makes no sense to me. So what is happening, and what is the solution? And do you think releasing this video and the audio, which I just played, will change anything? Will change the minds of the people out there? Now, I have a great call here I want to take real quick before we go to a break. It's from Ron in Deltona. You say you're an ex-cop. What do you think about all this, especially when I play the video?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was an ex. Let me be clear. I'm not a 20-year retired guy. I spent 5 years in Illinois working 11 to 7 at night. The town I worked in had a project area, so we had a black community. But no cop that I worked with in that town put a uniform on wondering who they could shoot that night. It was crazy. Back in the 70s, you had respect. I think 99% of the people I stopped, whether they were black or white, for whatever reason I stopped them, were respectful of me, answered my questions, obeyed my commands, and frankly, I never shot anybody. I never shot at anybody. Nobody shot at me.
And
the times have changed.
Well, and I'm thinking, in both the situations in Tulsa, which the officer in charge of Tulsa is being charged with manslaughter, and this situation, and other situations, they're defying orders from the cops. I mean, they're not following the orders. Even though that guy had his hands up, he wasn't following the orders of the cop. Why? Why is that happening?
Well, an important thing is you were trained to tell them to drop the weapon. You don't let them point it at you before you shoot. If they point it at you, they get the first shot. And that's not the way you're trained to do the job. And
people say, well, they shouldn't be trained that way.
I'm sorry, that's the way they should be trained.
Now, why is that? And I'm honest. I'm trying to have an honest discussion about this and trying to get answers, because I will have people tell me, well, they shouldn't be trained that way. They shouldn't believe that their life is on the line all the time.
When the gun is pointed at you, and when you see the smoke coming out of the gun, that bullet has already hit you. You're not trained to wait for them to take the first shot. That's just ridiculous.
Okay, and so when they're armed and a cop says put down the gun, I'm hearing you should put down the gun.
Absolutely.
And
if they're not making a motion to point that at you, you're not going to shoot them. You tell them to drop the gun. And like I said, this was back in the 70s, and they did that. They put the gun down. They said, yes, sir, no, sir, what can I do? You didn't shoot people. It was a different time. I don't know how to explain it. It was just respect, I think, is lacking.
Now, I mean, in being honest here, because another thing I hear is, okay, while more whites are killed by cops than blacks, the proportion, it doesn't match with the proportion of the population. Where 13% of the population is black, 24% of those killed by cops are black. So it says you have more of a chance of being killed by a cop if you're black. That's how they interpret it. But from what I also hear is that blacks commit far more crime, and nonviolent crime, which means they're far more likely to be stopped by a cop. I'm just wondering, is when you went out in the force, is there a perception out there? Is there a part of you that when you dealt with a black person, you looked at them differently?
No, I tell you, I don't know how much time you got, but I can relate a real quick little story to you. I ended up in kind of a wrestling match one night with a young black man, and in getting him under control and handcuffs on him, my gun came out of my holster, and an elderly black man saw it happen. After the excitement settled down, the gentleman walked up to me and handed me the gun and said, "Officer, I think you'll probably need this."
Wow.
It was different times. I'm telling you, it was different times.
So to you, it seems like the issue is a lack of respect for authority.
Yes, sir.
Wow, Ron, thank you. It was a great call. So that's another issue you throwing in here that I really didn't think about. So you have the issue of, are cops racially profiling too much, and is there institutional racism out there? Are the black communities committing too many crimes and they need to clean up their act? Is this a lot about political division? If you look at the Black Lives Matter organization, they're a communist organization that wants political division. That's what they want. Doesn't mean everyone in the movement wants that, but the leaders of the organization do. And then you have a cop here that just called, said it didn't used to be like this, and said it's a lack of respect for authority. And I think a lot of it's perception. When you see videos out there, you immediately think, well, that could be me, especially if you're a black guy. But it won't be you if you're following the instructions of the cop. So what's happening here? And then you don't see the videos of whites being killed by cops. And they're out there. I have seen them. There are a lot of them out there. And then I get another question. Well, why don't whites care about that? Maybe the whites should care about that more. I don't know. Some whites do, but they don't believe it's about race, I guess. Or they give the cops the benefit of the doubt more. We're going to get more into this, and we're going to do both sides of this. And I want your calls and texts. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We're going to do this show till 9 p.m. We're going to talk a lot about this issue, and maybe we'll come up with some solutions. It's Beyond Reason Radio on BeyondReasonRadio.com, the Beyond Reason Radio app, at News Radio 102.5 WFLA.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. Now, back to Beyond Reason Radio.
Yes, I am your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. Your host, Michael Yaffee. I usually co-host and produce Good Morning Orlando on this station on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. We're also broadcasting on Facebook Live. Just go to Beyond Reason Radio, like us at Beyond Reason Radio. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, at Beyond Reason R. That is Beyond Reason, the letter R. We have some calls coming in. I really want solutions. And to be honest, I've addressed a bunch of different issues here, and we're going to keep doing that. But I think a lot of this is a combination of things, really. But I feel like we're not listening to each other in this issue. And I feel like facts don't matter. It's all about perception. And that's social media. That's the world we live in. Perception seems to defeat reality. But I think there is some truth to both issues. I think there is some truth because believe it or not, I have many black friends. I know some people say, oh, that's the racist thing to say, but I'm just saying it out there. I've had many black friends, many black coworkers, many black teachers, many black bosses. They've been a part of my life. And I just don't believe, and maybe I should, that this country is that racist still. We elect a black president. We have blacks in every level of society. Every level of society. We have blacks in every income bracket. We have black police officers. I imagine if someone like Frederick Douglass, who was fighting real oppression, slavery, before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and what he had to go through, and imagine if he came from the past, came to today, and see all the opportunities that blacks have in today's world. And there might be some legitimate grievances, but then to see rioting, which is beyond reason in itself because half the people rioting are white. And then, but imagine he sees that. He probably wouldn't understand it. He would say, you have so much opportunity now. We have come so far. And yet now we seem even more divided somehow. How is this possible? 407-916-5400. Let's go to Paula in Lake Mary. Paula, you are on with me, Michael Yaffee. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm okay. A little frustrated, as you could probably tell by the tone of my voice, because I feel like we're just never going to come to a solution with this. But go ahead.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. And actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking about solution. What is the solution? And, that's definitely an aspect I probably need to spend more time on.
I think a lot of us do, yes.
I also wanted to comment because you had made a statement earlier with the other caller about, the difference between shooting by police officers of black men particularly, and then as opposed to, we don't see the shootings of white men or white people by police officers. And almost involuntarily, I did scream out. Fortunately, I was in my car with the windows up, but I screamed out, you don't see shootings of police officers either.
That's true.
Random shootings where officers nowadays, and let me just preface this by saying I was in law enforcement from the age of 17 when I got into Police Explorers all the way through 20 some odd years in the police force and retired several years ago. So I know a little bit of what I'm saying. You don't see officers getting mowed down, shot, ambushed the way that's been happening in the last few years. What absolutely makes me crazy is, all of the issues or problems, to me, a lot of it comes back to no consequences for action. For example, if you want to protest something, fine. But these people that are going out there and looting and hurting police officers randomly and shooting them randomly for no reason, I'm not seeing any consequences. I don't understand. I don't get this world anymore. And I also have to say I have a very close relative who's a police officer in Charlotte right now. And I am absolutely worried sick for police. And we have a leadership, and you were talking about perception, and I will tell you this. Years ago, a black lieutenant told me, and I'm just saying because I remember these words, he said, Paula, your perception is your reality. People's perceptions are their reality.
I see, and I think that's
that.
a big part of this. I think
Huge.
they're raised, and it might be on both sides. Because if cops, I understand that if blacks are pulled over by cops way too much, they're going to have a bad perception of cops. But if cops deal with troublemaker blacks more than they do troublemaker whites, then that's going to have a bad perception on blacks for cops.
Well,
so it talks about both sides of the bad perception.
Right. We need a leadership that has the ability to differentiate, which apparently the one we have now doesn't, because there has been nothing, and this is maybe my perception, but it is my reality. There has been nothing but vilifying of police officers ever since the last 8 years, and almost making heroes out of thugs. And it just is painting this narrative that is causing utter and complete chaos and extreme behavior on both ends, particularly by police. Because when I was a cop, we did not feel as though we didn't have support from all the way up through the president. And honest to Pete, I have no idea why police officers haven't, by the numbers, walked off the job.
I think a lot of them. I think a lot of them are. And Paul, I thank you for your call. We're just out of time, but I think a lot of them are. And I actually had a good friend who left the police force for this very reason. He was just scared. And look at this stat here. This is according to the FBI data. They found that 40% of cop killers are black. The police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black than a cop killing an unarmed black person. So if that's the truth, and the cops see that out there, doesn't that create a perception as well? It's both sides here. And until we can understand that, And until both sides take responsibility, that's not what's, and I don't see that happening. Nobody wants to take responsibility for their own actions, their own communities, their own perceptions. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio here at BeyondReasonRadio.com and the app and News Radio 102.5 WFLA.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio.
Yes, this is Orlando Smart Talk Radio. We are trying to have a discussion on the problems of race in this country because it frustrates me. And it has to be more about race now. It has to be. When half the people rioting are white and then half the cops that are stopping the rioters are black. There was video out there, and I don't have the audio of this, of a black cop who said, you know, I would want to stand with a lot of you protesters, but I can't stand with you if you're rioting like this. They're going to lose people on their own side. If you want people on your side, why would you do that? But I want to get back to the issue of both sides of the argument here. And I have audio here, which many of you heard. It happened, I think he said this a couple months ago, at least a few weeks ago, from Senator Tim Scott. He's black. He's a Republican. And yet he gets on the floor of the Senate and he makes a comment that seems a legitimate point, and a lot of blacks I know would probably relate to this. And so if this is happening, why is this happening? And how do we fix the problem? This is what Tim Scott said.
In the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times by law enforcement officers. Not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 times in 1 year as an elected official. Was I speeding sometimes? Sure. But the vast majority of the time, I was pulled over for nothing more than driving a new car in the wrong neighborhood or some other reason just as trivial. I recall walking into an office building just last year after being here for 5 years on the Capitol. And the officer looked at me with a little attitude and said, "The pen, I know. You, I don't. Show me your ID." I'll tell you, I was thinking to myself, either he thinks I'm committing a crime impersonating a member of Congress, or what? Well, I'll tell you that later that evening, I received a phone call from his supervisor apologizing for the behavior. Mr. President, that is at least the 3rd phone call that I've received from a supervisor or the chief of police since I've been in the Senate. So while I thank God I have not endured bodily harm, I have, however, felt the pressure applied by the scales of justice when they are slanted. I have felt the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and the humiliation that comes with feeling like you're being targeted for nothing more than being just yourself.
So when I hear that audio, I can't just discount it. I can't just say, well, he's just trying to divide us. This is all politics. This is racial politics. He's not being truthful. It's, I can't discount it. He's a Republican. He has no interest in Black Lives Matter or the Democrat Party or where the NAACP has gone. He disagrees with all of those points. And yet he's a senator. And just because he's black, it seems pretty obvious. He's been stopped multiple times. And he even had to, they don't even believe he's a senator because he's black. So when I see that, I'm like, why is this happening? This should not be happening. I can't discount that. So when that happens over and over to blacks, of course they're going to have negative views of police. So that's one side of it as well. Now, the statistics show that doesn't mean they're going to be killed by police. It's just not showing that. As I showed you, a cop has more chance of being killed by a black person than a black person by a cop. Those are just facts. But that creates a perception. Tim Scott has a perception out there of cops because of what they've done. Now, why are the cops doing it? Is it just institutional racism? I find that very hard to believe in today's society, that it's just that simple. There's more to this. And it's a number of things. So what's the solution here? 479-16-5400. Let's go to Scott in Leesburg. Scott, you were on Beyond Reason Radio with me and Michael Yaffee. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Well, with regard to that senator, there's another side to that coin. I understand his being disgruntled, but on one hand, if he was in his nice car, being who he is, and he's in a neighborhood that's not normally seeing that sort of stuff, maybe he could appreciate at least a little bit that the police officers were taking the time to make sure that everything was on the up and up.
But the only reason they were is because of this color of his skin, in his opinion.
Well, that's his perception of it, but maybe he was just, a fish out of water, so to speak, and they wanted to make sure everything was cool. But
maybe, but when it happens as many times as it did to him, it seems more likely that that's not just the case. But go ahead.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying there's another side to the coin. The other side of the coin is they're trying to patrol this area, and when they see something that's out of the ordinary, like somebody in a nice car that's not normally in that side of town, the perception might be maybe that's a drug dealer. I should check this out. Maybe it's something.
But see, that creates a false perception too. But in the other sense, that you have to be black to be a drug dealer.
I'm saying, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to keep that neighborhood safe and keep the wrong people out of it. Yeah, it sounds like, and this is a good point that I've made, it sounds like you're not justifying it, you're just trying to explain it. And that's a good point. What's your take on all this? You had a comment here about obeying the law. Well, when people get confrontations with the law, I mean, the saying goes, you're having trouble with the cops, try not breaking the law, see how that works out.
And they'll say, but Tim Scott will say he wasn't breaking the law and he was still stopped too many times by cops.
Well, he wasn't shot, he wasn't hit, he wasn't hurt, they didn't detain him, didn't put him in handcuffs.
That's true too. In most of these situations, if not all of these, and you're right. And Scott, your phone's kind of breaking up a little bit. But in most of the situations, in all of these situations, it seems like they're not following the instructions of the cop. I played the audio of the shooting in Charlotte, and you hear them over and over and over and over and over again. Put down the gun, put down the gun, put down the gun, put down the gun. The situation in Tulsa, he had his hands up for part of it, but he was walking to his car. He was obviously not following the instructions, and he had PCP in his car. And he was being belligerent, was not following the instructions. Now, does that mean that you should kill him? No, I'm not saying that. But it does partly explain it. But see the perceptions that are created. You have a perception, and Tim Scott has a legitimate point here. He's obviously being racially profiled. And that's going to create a perception. If that keeps happening to a lot of black people, then it's not too far of a jump for them, even if it's not true. It's not too far of a jump for them to believe that cops would more likely to kill them. But you have to look at the other side as well, too. Because if you're a cop and you're constantly having problems with the black community, does that not also create a perception of there's more likely to be trouble if I'm dealing with a black male, especially in certain parts of town? Or is this going just too far? Now, you look at the other side of the coin as well. You have a black rapper named Lil Wayne. I'm sure many of you know I'm not a huge fan of his music or anything, but I know who he is. If anyone, he's in the rap community. He's been in rough parts of town. He had a rough childhood. He's dealt with cops a lot. And yet he says something in an interview. I I forget, it was actually a sports interview. But he said something that was flat out amazing to me. That goes totally against what Tim Scott said and a lot of the Black Lives Matter said. Now, how does this happen? Go ahead and roll that audio.
God knows I have been nothing but blessed. My whole path, these 33 years have been nothing but a blessing. I have never, never is a strong word, I've never dealt with racism. That day that I shot myself, the police, I was the only person in the house. Right. Police came through there. They knocked the doors down. I was on the floor. Right. They jumped over. They all hopped over me and went looking for the drugs and looking for this and that. It was a white police that came, ran up there and stopped and said, "What are y'all doing? Do y'all not see this baby on the floor?" And they said, "We called the ambulance. The ambulance." Say, "Ambulance, he has a hole in his chest." He picked me up. He brought me to the hospital himself. He was white.
So there you go. This is someone who should maybe deal with it more. And he says, "I've never dealt with racism." And I think we can all agree that this country has come a long way, especially in the South, with dealing with racism. And yes, of course, there's still racists out there. And by the way, they're on both sides. But maybe I'm too idealistic. Maybe I'm too positive, which I'm usually not told that by most people. But I don't believe that the majority of white people in this country are racist. Inherently racist. And racism is so stupid. I hate racism. If you know me, you know I hate the idea of racism. And I don't think the majority of whites are racist. But there's a perception that is created on both sides. And there are different things we have to do as a society to deal with that perception. And you know what? A lot of it is politics as well, because you look at these struggling black communities, they're run by Democrats. Big government progressive. If you want to be upset at whites, be upset at the white progressives that passed the Great Society programs and the white Democrat leaders in a lot of these inner cities that have destroyed your communities. Be upset at them. Don't be upset necessarily at the white cops who are trying to help you clean up those communities. But that also does not justify cops constantly racially profiling. 407-916-5400. We're going to get another take on this. Some more audio that I want to play in the next segment. We'll also take more of your calls and texts at 23680. And by the way, I have to thank Rob producing for me today. He's been the one in there playing the audio. Appreciate him coming in and helping as well so we can take calls and maybe get some answers and solutions and perspective to this. 407-916-5400. You're listening to Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com.
Yes, this is Michael Yaffee. Join Rob producing with me as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio, the conscience in your ear. That tells you the difference between right and wrong. We're taking calls. We're taking text. We're trying to deal with what's going on in Charlotte. What we do know, if Keith Lamar Scott was armed, what we do know is he was constantly told by police to drop the gun. What we do know is many of the rioters in Charlotte were white, and many of the officers stopping the riots were black. What we do know is a lot of people that were rioting and protesting were not even from Charlotte. And then I'm thinking, if this is really about racism with police departments, why is it Black Lives Matter calls for a lot more than just ending police brutality? Here's some of the things they are calling for. The demilitarization of law enforcement and the immediate end to the privatization of police. They're calling for reparations. They're calling for community control, democratic community control of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. They're calling for the immediate release of many criminals who have drug-related offenses and prostitution. They want release of that. This tells me it's a lot more than just police racism. And they want economic justice, a progressive restructuring of tax codes to ensure radical and sustainable redistribution of wealth. Socialism. So I thought this was about racism and police brutality against blacks and killing of blacks. Why are they calling for all this other stuff? What does it have to do with it? I don't know. You tell me. 47916-5400. We'll take a call here. Maurice in Orlando, you have a comment on all this.
About this. First of all,
sorry, man, I can't. Sorry, he cussed on the air. I can't have to do that. Sorry, Maurice, I've had you on before. You're a good guy, but you can't cuss on the air. You can't cuss on the air. So I just wanted to point that out. But this is a very frustrating topic for me, like I've said. Because, and I've heard other people say this, facts don't seem to matter here. There's obviously a lot of underlying problems that are causing this here. And I'm not sure what the solution is, but we're ripping each other apart over this. And it could happen in any city, apparently. And, you know, what's another thing that's amazing to me, too, is not only how divided the country is, but how divided the black community seems to be about this lately. You look at the NFL protesters who are kneeling during the national anthem. A lot of them, you know, you look at them, a lot of those who are not kneeling are black. I see still a lot of black players standing for the national anthem. So obviously they don't buy into what Kaepernick's saying. So what's happening here? What is this really all about? I think for some, yes, it is about they feel that police are unjust to them in the black community. But I think for others, it's about politics. It's about perception. They're taught to be distrustful of the criminal justice system. And you know what? Here's another thing that bothers me. And Rob, I'm going to have you skip to a different audio cut here. The one that says chant. This is something that happened in Charlotte. It's not getting a lot of attention. But the protesters, some of the rioters, they go outside, you know, a jail, a prison in the city. And they go out and they stop, and this is what they're chanting. Play that for me, Rob, when you get a chance here.
We see you. We love you. Marcus, I know you.
So they're outside chanting, "We see you, we love you. We see you, we love you." They're outside a jail in Charlotte, chanting. And the people in the jail are flickering their lights off and on. And see, this is another thing. I'll tell people, well, the fact is, blacks seem to commit more of the violent crime in this country. No, they're just being arrested more for it. So now we're totally going to throw the justice system under the bus. We're going to believe that that's racism, too. And I'm not talking about just any crime. I'm talking violent crime when you look at the statistics. Unfortunately, it happens way too much in the black communities. And instead of taking some responsibility for that and saying that might create some of the bad perception of cops in this country for blacks, it's, well, the justice system's racist as well. So now it's about releasing, and Obama's been doing this. He's been pardoning a ton of prisoners. So now they go outside of jail and they're chanting, "We see you, we love you." And I'm not against love, but you know what this is about? They believe that they shouldn't be in there. Why? Did they commit the crime? Don't break the law, and you won't be put in jail. But see, that's another thing. You tell some people that, and, well, that's not true. They're put in there just because they're black. A lot of them didn't break the laws. So we're going to distrust. This worries me. It shows distrust. It's fueling distrust in our justice system, even though in a lot of these places like Charlotte, the judges are black, the cops are black, the city leaders are black, the police chief is black. And we're going to make more of that point in the next hour. This hour went by quick, but we're going to get back to this topic. I'm going to play the audio again of the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott in Charlotte, and we'll get your take, and we'll try to come up with some solutions. I think it's going to take both sides accepting some responsibility for this. Maybe you agree or disagree. First hour of Beyond Reason Radio is already up, but we have one more full jam-packed hour to go with a lot more audio, a lot more perspective, and I will be right back.
I couldn't sleep, I had to listen to a conscience knowing so well.
So if you've been listening to the first hour of Beyond Reason Radio, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. I'm joined by Rob producing in the control room for me. You know I'm a little frustrated this week. And I'm actually frustrated now on 2 counts. The race issue frustrates me because I feel like it's one of those issues where no one's objective. I feel like neither side's ever objective. The Trayvon Martin thing always frustrated me when we would have to talk about it when that was going on. Because I would hear from one side, well, Trayvon Martin was a thug. He deserved to die. Zimmerman was an innocent, white, stand-up member of the community. And then I would hear from the other side, well, Trayvon Martin was an innocent black guy. He was just an innocent little kid walking home, didn't do anything wrong, and he didn't deserve to die for that. Neither side of that argument is right. But that's what was thrown out there. And every time racial things come up, that's what happens. That's what's thrown out there. Instead of looking at these cases individually like you should, which I would hope a justice system would do, I hope they do the same for me if I was ever in the justice system. We come to conclusions all based on their perception of what police are or institutional racism, or the problems in the black community. Most of it's perception. The facts show that the number of blacks being killed by cops has been dramatically decreasing for decades. The facts show that especially in the shootings in the past year, they've been armed, which changes everything. So the whole unarmed black people being copped is not the same. The fact shows that cops are more likely to be killed by a black person than a black person by a cop. But the facts show as well, especially when you listen to Tim Scott, a Republican senator, that racial profiling does exist. That blacks have higher unemployment, that black communities have a hard time getting jobs, that they have worse education, and that creates problems as well. So what's the solution? And I don't want to hear this, well, blacks need to act better. Probably some truth to that in some communities. But I also want to hear, well, it's just institutional racism, and if we get rid of the racism, it will just solve everything. I don't buy that. It's too simple for me. Maybe I'm too idealistic, but I don't believe our whole system is still racist. Especially to the extent that a lot of these groups believe. And then I look at this week and the riots in Charlotte. I'm told this is all about race. And I get even more frustrated. Oh, by the way, the second thing that frustrates me, I didn't get to this. Ted Cruz has now endorsed Donald Trump. Why are you laughing in there, Rob?
Well, Ted Cruz is your guy. He's always been your guy. And
yes.
He finally came around for Trump.
Now, I can't be too upset at him because I'm basically doing the same thing, and I've said that. But I kind of respected that he stuck with his guns, especially at the convention, and said he's not going to do it. He's not going to endorse it, and all of a sudden turning around. And it's the same argument I've heard from everybody, that he's not Hillary Clinton, which I understand. But, I kind of wanted him to stick to it. I'm kind of disappointed in that. But the other thing that frustrates me is I'm looking at the video from the riots in Charlotte, and half the rioters, it seems like, are white. And then half the cops stopping the riot are black. So it's not racial anymore. The person who shot the guy was black. The police chief is black. And almost half the police force is black. So you're telling me institutional racism is still a problem? Well, apparently it's a problem in your own community then. Apparently blacks are racist against blacks then. Is that what's happening? I don't understand it. But with the audio, the video has come out from Charlotte of the shooting of Keith Lamar Scott. And the wife, the family of him, released a video, cell phone video. And this is what happened. This is what took place. This is the audio of that encounter.
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He has no weapon. He has no weapon. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything. He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys. He just took his medicine. Keith, don't let them break the windows. Come on out the car. Keith, don't do it. Keith, get out the car. Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it. Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? He better not be dead. He better not be dead. I know that much. I know that much. He better not be dead. I'm not going to come near you. I'm going to record, though. I'm not coming near you. I'm going to record, though. He better be alive, because you better be alive. How about that? Yes, we're over here at 9453 Lexington Court. These are the police officers that shot my husband, and he better live. He better live, because he didn't do nothing to them. He good. Ain't nobody touch nobody, so they all good. I know he better live. I know he better live.
So there you have it. What are the facts after watching that video? Well, one, yes, the wife says he doesn't have a gun, but the police say drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. Then more than one of them say drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. Then she says, you hear her say, get out of the car, follow her instructions. She didn't say those exact words, but she said, don't do it, don't you do it, don't you do it, don't you do what? Telling Keith to say not to do what? And at the end of the video, you see the gun. It's there. The officer, one of the officers there who they say shot him, is black. He didn't follow instructions. Now, they were actually looking for somebody else, but they were participating in an investigation, and if he would just follow instructions, he'd probably be alive today. Will this video change anything? Probably not, because facts don't matter. It's all about perception. I talked about in the first hour. And some of it's justified perception, because if you're a black person like Tim Scott, like I played in the first hour, and you're constantly profiled based on your race for not doing anything wrong, of course you're going to have a negative perception of police. And almost every black person I talk to agrees that happens. Now, I actually know a lot of white people that have negative perceptions of police as well, because they get treated badly by police as well. So, but if you're a cop and you know the stats that you are more likely to be killed by a black person than a white person, and that's not saying that because of their skin color that's the case, that's just facts. That's the statistics. And that if you're a cop and you're constantly dealing with troublemakers who are black, more often than not, it's going to create a false perception in your mind as well. And not only that, we had a cop earlier on the show who said, You don't wait for him to point the gun at you to kill him. Because as soon as he points the gun at you and you see the smoke, you're already shot. And, I talked to another person. I've talked to another cop before who said this idea a lot of times, why do they have to shoot him multiple times? Which they actually didn't sound like they did in this situation or the situation in Tulsa. The reason you shoot them multiple times because it's not like the movies. Once you shoot them, they don't always just fall down immediately. They could still be going towards you. So you shoot them to eliminate the threat because you want to go home. But facts don't seem to matter. We see this, and yet we still hear that it's just institutional racism. Is it? Oh, it's just the problems in the black community. Is it? I don't know. And if it's both, how do we fix this? Our leadership in Washington sure isn't trying to fix it. It took Obama days to comment on what was going on in Charlotte. And Hillary Clinton basically pandered to both sides. I might need to find that audio later. She basically says something without saying anything at all. So we don't have any real leadership on this. So I get frustrated because I feel like both sides are not being honest, and both sides are probably at fault here a little bit. I can't expect blacks to ignore the history of racism in this country. But I also can't just expect whites to be racist, because that's not my experience. Believe it or not, most white people I run into are not racist. They work with blacks. They have black friends. They see blacks every day in their lives. If it was really that big of an issue, we would see a lot more problems in this country because of it, but we don't. We've come so far. Does that mean we're perfect? No. We're never going to be perfect. But the perception's still out there. Now, I have a couple calls on this I want to get to, especially from Russ in Orlando, because you're kind of making the same point I just made. Russ, you are on Beyond Reason Radio. What's your take on this?
Hey, Michael, I think you're hitting the nail on the head about perception. People want to lead the narrative. That's kind of where we're at this point in our society. If you'll play along with me, I'll kind of use an example.
Sure.
Are you afraid of snakes?
Yes. Well, sometimes.
Okay. Well,
I actually want a pet snake, but if I saw one in the wild, yes, I'd be afraid of them.
Okay, and why?
Because, I think I get the point you're taking, because you hear that they could bite you. You're taught that they could bite you and kill you.
Okay. And so here's the facts. Now, that's the perception. Here's the facts. And most everyone has the same perception.
Yeah, of course.
The facts are there's about 3,500 varieties. There's only about 11% that are venomous. And in fact, there's no such thing as a poisonous snake. But they're venomous. They have poison, but it's venom injected poison.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's a perception as well. So,
True.
And also snakes are not offensive; they're mostly defensive. And so there's almost no reason to be a snake unless you step on one, and then that one has to be poisonous. And there's only probably in America only about a 6 to 8% chance that is going to be poisonous, and you're almost always going to have to be in the wild. So, the perception is that. So. Why do we have that perception? Well, because we've been told that all our life, and because every time we see a snake on TV, it's used in a bad way, almost always. It's like, this is something bad, stay away from it, that sort of thing. So I think that these things are being, the videos that we're seeing are videos of black people being shot by cops when there's so many white people that get shot by cops.
Oh, double the amount of white people.
Those videos are out there as well.
But they're not broadcast everywhere.
They're not broadcast.
And mostly because whites aren't as upset about it. Because they give the cops the benefit of the doubt.
And then there you go. Then why are whites not so much upset about it? Because they're not told to be upset about it. Black people are told to be upset about it.
In a lot of cases, yes, they are.
The point is when they're showing it on TV, and the narrative that goes along with it is, look how bad this is. Well, of course, we all agree. I think white people as well. That's a horrible thing. Not always horrible. I mean, I don't have a problem with, what happened in Ferguson. With he was trying to kill the cop. He tried to get the guys,
Well, and he just robbed a store.
Exactly. Well, he tried to kill the cop. He reached in and tried to take his gun.
And even witnesses say that he was reaching into the cop car.
But I see a lot of these videos, and you and I both, we just look at it from a humanitarian standpoint because we could care less about the skin color of the cop or the person being shot, and we look at it and go like, that shouldn't have happened that way. Sometimes I say right away, that's a murder. Sometimes I say, well, let me see the rest of the facts.
But it seems like in a lot of these cases, even that they're riding over, that's not the case, that it's not murder.
Exactly right. And remember the writing, and you made that an important point. What was it? 70% of the people being arrested aren't even from there.
Yeah.
George Soros is, everybody knows about George Soros, at least your audience.
Mm-hmm.
They know that he is funding these radical groups so they can go.
Yeah,
around
and
kind
Black
of
Lives Matter. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Black Lives Matter is definitely a radical group. Just look at their website.
Yeah, and that's really what they're about. They're just using black as their something to rage about. They'll go use whatever anywhere that they can see some weakness, and they can stir something up. Weakness being a lack of intelligence, and they're going to find a group of people that they can go into, and they can because just like you talked about, the mayor is black, the cop is black. You might have seen the picture that went viral where it's a courtroom, and you see that the officer, the perpetrator is black, the officer with him is black, and then the lawyer is black. And you can say the problem here is not race, is it? The problem is the choices you make in life.
Well, and it's hard. It's a hard point. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's race too when half the cops that are stopping the riots are black.
Yeah, that's my thing. But the point is the people who are pushing the narrative, including, much in the mainstream media, because, listen, I work in television. It makes great television.
So, I work in media, too, so I definitely understand
exactly.
that.
So that's what we do for a living is we try to get people to look at our, look at us, look at our station, turn on our channel, radio, TV, whatever. So being somewhat provocative is an important part of being in media.
Yeah.
You want people to come watch your station. So,
and Russ, you make a great point on perception as well, and this kind of hit me in terms of the snakes thing. It goes well beyond this Black Lives Matter thing. It's global warming, it's GMO foods, it's animal rights, it's all this stuff. It's always perception versus reality.
Well, it's Zelensky tactics, and they're being very well, being performed beautifully by, as what we call the left, but the progressive, it always has been. I mean, they've been doing that long before Zelensky. Zelensky was just the guy who really wrote the book on it, so to speak. But, the people who are driving the narrative are Zelenskyites. Some of them don't even know they are. They're kind of pulled in.
Well, yeah, and that's the point on Black Lives Matter, too, and that they don't even know what the organization really stands for, a lot of the followers, but they should know.
Yeah, but see, they're there, like I say, they go after the lowest in intelligence, or the people that the most vulnerable is the word I should say, not so much intelligence, but the least educated, the most vulnerable. They go get those people, they stir them up because they're very emotional about things, and so they find people that they can emotionally stir up, and they get them down there, and they get them fighting and arguing and doing those kind of things, and they say white people are your problem. I mean, even the president has said that.
Russ, I appreciate your call. Thanks for calling, my friend.
Great show, buddy.
Yeah, we've talked before and met before. He's a good guy. I just realized who it was halfway through the call. So we're gonna. Did you have a take on this?
Oh, big time. You have to be very careful. I understand what Russ was saying about comparing black people to snakes, but you got to be careful of those analogies. I mean, who got in trouble this last week for comparing immigrants to Skittles? I mean, you just can't do that.
Well, and that's the one issue
his
where we're
point
so
was well
afraid.
taken, but you cannot compare snakes to black people, Russ. I mean, it's just not. That's not good.
Well, yeah,
I understand his point.
He didn't really compare snakes to black people.
He was going exactly what he did. He was saying that
Well, he was
are you
saying,
afraid of them? Are you?
But
no,
but
you know
he
you're
was,
afraid of them. I mean, yeah, you're afraid of snakes.
Saying,
he could have just replaced snakes with black people, and it would have been his analogy.
But he was saying the reason why we're afraid. We're afraid of snakes, but we shouldn't be. And the perception is that we're afraid.
I don't like the analogy. I don't like comparing black people to snakes, period. And I don't like comparing immigrants to Skittles either. It's just not right. You took Trump Jr. took a lot of heat for that.
Oh, man. Oh, we could get some calls on that. I think you're a little more sensitive than I am on that. But we'll get some calls on that. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio here, beyondreasonradio.com and News Radio 102.5 WFLA.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast.
So Rob and I got in a little bit of a discussion at the end of the last segment because Russ called in, and I think he made a really good point, that so much of this is about perception. And perception is reality to a lot of people, but perception isn't reality in terms of the truth a lot of times. And he used the example of snakes, that a lot of times you're afraid of snakes because there's a perception out there that snakes are poisonous, that they could kill you, that they're bad, and all this stuff. And what he was making the point is really only 11% are poisonous, and most of them are defensive. And if you're really dealing with snakes out there in the wild, the chances are you're not going to get bit by a poisonous snake. Now, Rob, you had a problem with that comment.
I didn't like the analogy at all, comparing, human beings, black people, their race, to snakes, which is,
but
it just has a negative connotation.
But really, though, it almost could go the other way, that he was really comparing cops.
So we're looking at both sides.
Yeah.
You could say that the cops are the snakes.
But I don't have a problem with analogies, because a lot of times analogies is what helps you understand things a little better, like the parables in the Bible or something.
Yeah.
But all right, so I want to play some audio here from Ben Shapiro as well, because we've talked about the other side, especially in the last hour, and we're going to talk about this more coming up in terms of Tim Scott. This is the best example I've seen, but it's out there. You talk to most black people out there, they'll tell you this is true. He talked about how he was constantly stopped by Capitol Police, by people in Washington, just because he's black. Wasn't doing anything wrong. He's a senator, and he's a Republican senator, a conservative. And he's pointing these things out. So when that keeps happening to the black community, of course they're going to have a negative perception of police, and they're going to be more afraid, and they're not going to give police the benefit of the doubt as much because they've grew up with that. And that's understandable. But to just stop right there and say, well, it's institutional racism, that's proof of it, blah, blah, blah. You have to look at the other side of this as well, especially for the cops. And I found some audio of Ben Shapiro. It's gone viral. He's a conservative columnist, podcaster out there. I'm sure many of you know. And he makes a great point on the other side of this, that, well, we have to look at the problems in the black community as well. And they're real problems. There's two cuts I want to play here. This is the first cut.
I'm offended by the language of uprising applied to people who are breaking into other black people's stores and looting them. This is a lack of values. And people who are destroying private property, destroying cop cars, in an uprising against what exactly? Against the black police chief, against a mostly minority police force, against the black mayor, against the black president, against the black attorney general, against against a city council that is 9 of 15 are black and all 15 are elected Democrats. What is the uprising against? What is it seeking to achieve? I still don't see what exactly the riots are seeking to achieve. Bottom line is, this is all... It all could be boiled down to just act like a mensch. Act like a human being. Honestly, it's not useful to riot, it's not useful to break things, it's not useful to throw rocks at people. And the idea that we're supposed to sort of correlate your level of outrage.
I'm going to stick to the 30 seconds on this.
The last sentence. The last sentence. The idea that we're supposed to correlate your level of outrage with a certain level of justification. In other words, the more outraged you are and the more angry you are, the more justified you must be, is absolute nonsense.
Does he not make a valid point there? That, for one, rioting solves nothing. 2, just because you're outraged doesn't mean you're right. And 3, what's the uprising against? When you have the majority of the city council's black, the black mayor, black police chief, you have black judges. That's what happened in Baltimore. And that's what he's talking about there. He's talking actually about Baltimore. The cops involved in that situation were black, a lot of them. So what's the uprising against? Is it just general police brutality? But that's not what's being heard. And then he makes another great point in terms of the black community. He's asked about economic inequality in the black community and why that's happening. And the reaction is telling, because there were some black panelists in this event as well, and they react to what Ben Shapiro said, and you'll hear it, and that's very telling. But he makes a good point here that can't be ignored as well. This is what he said.
How can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't... And when... You know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high? Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Is that not a great point as well? There's a lot of facts there, but he's exactly right. You look at those stats in the black communities and the black culture, and those are things that have to be addressed if we're going to move forward. And if that community is going to get better. And whites need to help with that as well. But you can't just discount that and say it's institutional racism. Because all of those facts he just said are true as well. So what's the solution here? And I've been saying this the whole show. I don't know exactly. Most of it to me is, for one, get the facts. Stop just believing in your perception and actually get the facts and the truth. And two, take responsibility on your side as well. Whites need to take responsibility and stop profiling so much, but blacks need to take responsibility and clean up their communities and stop voting for progressive policies that are destroying them. We're going to take more calls on this. I have another take. There was an interesting exchange on the 5 yesterday between Bowling and Juan Williams that I want to play as well. That's very telling. Also, audio from an NAACP leader in Charlotte who said something that's very interesting that makes no sense to me. That's beyond reason. And we'll get to that as well. 47916-5400 if you want to call, and text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime.
Yes, we have been on since 7 p.m. for Beyond Reason Radio, and I podcasted after the show because I want you to listen to the whole show. And a lot of you are driving. You can't listen to all 2 hours, but I need you to listen to all 2 hours, especially this show. It's an important show. I've played a lot of audio, made a lot of takes, taken a lot of calls, and I thought I want to come up with solutions for this. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting to me is I'm looking at some stories right now. Drudge has it that the gun has his fingerprints on it, has Keith's fingerprints on it. But not only that, but I keep hearing it doesn't show the gun in the video. I watched the video earlier. At the end of the video, you see the gun laying next to him. I can see it. So I'm not sure why I keep seeing this reported, that the video doesn't show the gun. It doesn't show it initially because you really can't see what's going on, and it doesn't show the shots being fired. But at the end of the video, you see a gun laying next to him. It's there. I can see it plain as day. And a lot of times you can't see it because there's a shadow. The officer's shadow is over the gun, so it's hard to see. But at the end of the video, seriously, it's there. So I'm not sure why I keep hearing this reported. But there you go. What we know, as I played the audio earlier, the cops say, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. The black police chief saying he had a gun. The black officer is the one who shot him. Will this change anything? Well, the protesters are still saying he didn't have a weapon. So what? Now we're just not going to believe facts. Now we're just not going to believe that. We're just going to believe the police chief's lying now. So every case of this, we're just going to believe that a black police chief's lying. If that's the case, we're never going to solve this problem. If we really distrust the system that much, and that's what a lot of this is about, is sowing the seeds of distrust to divide us. Because they don't, Black Lives Matter, the leaders, they've been a part of communist front groups in the past. They want distrust because they don't like the system. They want it changed, completely overhauled and changed. We're never going to solve the problem if we can't. And they're saying, oh, well, they should have released a video. Well, the video is out there. Pretty much proves that what the chief said was right. And now we still don't believe them. It's like with the 9/11 truthers. I hate the 9/11 truthers thing. We see with our own eyes what happened on 9/11, and we still don't believe it. So we see things that happen in our own eyes, and we still don't believe it. So where are we? And what's the solution to all of this? Steve in Orlando, you have a take on this. Thank you for holding, and I wanted to get your take. What's your take on all this?
Hey, thanks, Yaffee. So And by the way, I've only been watching or listening to your show for like 2 times, so I really like it.
Oh, thank you so much. Tell your friends, by the way.
Points. I wanted to make 2 points. The first you already brought up, just that, yeah, I agree that our perception is reality, but our perception may not be what is actually real, what is actually factual.
Exactly.
And I agree, because if we act on, what we assume to be real, then we're not going to make it. And so I feel like, the people that are, I guess, just, acting on these false, senses of reality are not making it, i.e. breaking laws without being held, or they don't think they need to be held accountable. And I don't have a solution, but the other point I wanted to bring up was that I think it's very, very, I'm a teacher of middle school, and I try and teach my kids this.
God bless you. I don't know how you do that, Jab. I was a youth pastor of middle schoolers once in a blue moon, and it's tough, man.
Yeah, but I always tell students, I'm like, hey, look, it's easier to point a finger at anyone else, anything else, than to really hold up a mirror or turn that finger right back around at yourself and really think about, what the wrongdoing is, where it came from, and just look deep inside yourself to realize any, for example, discrepancy between reality and perception, or, just it's so much easier to point the finger. I'm trying to make.
And Steve, you're exactly right. There are and this goes way beyond this one issue. There are so many issues in this country where that's all we do is we point the finger to someone else. And, it's even like in politics with Donald Trump. I will post something on Facebook that's critical of Trump because it's not conservative. Yeah. And all I get from half the people is, well, he's better than Hillary. Well, look what Hillary did. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I understand. But that's not the point I'm making.
Yeah.
And it's immediately point to other. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. On both sides, the whites point to the blacks point to the whites, and nothing gets solved. Nothing gets done.
It's ubiquitous, just like you said. It's white people, black people, us, people in Congress, everywhere, and nothing gets solved. And so, I don't really have any other words besides that's what I think is a problem and a potential solution. But nonetheless, that's going to be hard to do because people may realize that they are the problem.
Yeah. Steve, great call. Please keep listening. I'm glad you enjoy the show. Tell your friends. BeyondReasonRadio.com. Tell your friends. Just going to keep saying that. Well, one of the solutions, I guess I should have got to this earlier, is Jesus. It's why I'm a Christian. Because Christianity and your Christian faith is all about taking responsibility for yourself, admitting that you're a sinner, admitting you're not perfect and that you need a Savior. Spreading of the Christian faith would solve so many problems here. And Christianity teaches personal responsibility, but that's another thing we're throwing out of our society now, teaching that Christianity, personal responsibility, admitting that you're a sinner and need a Savior. No, we can't have that. With admitting that you're a sinner and you need a Savior also comes forgiveness and redemption as well, which the Bible teaches. We need that as well. So I wanted to play another comment here. This is Corinne Mack, the NAACP leader in Charlotte, one of the leaders in Charlotte. And she says something here that's flat out amazing to me. Remember, all of this started, when all this controversy started, it was about blacks, unarmed blacks being killed by cops and being killed by whites. Unarmed blacks, that was a controversy, right? Well, now apparently it's not. This is what she said.
At the end of the day, a video may show a different perspective depending on the angle. And so if we don't have many different angles, you may not get the full picture. I think the most important part is the contrast in him having a book versus a gun. But in my mind and in most of the community's mind, it really doesn't matter if he had a gun. At the end of the day, we have the right under the Second Amendment to carry here in North Carolina. And their responsibility was to engage him in a more de-escalated way, find out if he had a permit for his gun, and allow him to go on his merry way, and he would still be living today. That's not what happened. And so I don't want anyone to walk away from this conversation today thinking that a video showing he had a gun in any way said that he was guilty of anything.
So first off, since when has the NAACP believed in the right to carry a gun? All of a sudden now they're defending that, the Second Amendment, really. But the other thing is now all of a sudden we don't care that he had a gun. That doesn't make a difference to them. What? How does that not make a difference? Oh, well, they should have de-escalated it better. What is more de-escalating than put down the gun? Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Put down the gun. Just put down the gun. I just don't understand. But now the narrative's being changed because this was before the video came out. She knew that the video would probably show he had a gun. And now that doesn't matter. So now it's not only about unarmed blacks being killed, but armed blacks being killed. Interesting how that spread to fit a narrative here. Just saying. All right, we got another call I want to take here. This is Danny. Danny, what's your take on all this?
Well, Mike, love listening to you in the mornings and everything, and love that you have your show tonight.
Thanks, man.
My take on it is the problem is that somebody is teaching these kids not to listen to law enforcement.
And we had a cop on in the 7 o'clock hour, a former cop, who said, it didn't used to be like this. People would listen to law enforcement.
I mean, if they say put your hands up, you put your hands up. If they say put them in your pockets, you put them in your pockets. I mean, all you have to do is listen to these guys because all they're looking out is for their safety. And if you listen to them, you do exactly what they say, we would have none of these problems. But there's a society out there, maybe a younger religion that's teaching even younger religion that cops are not there to protect us, but to harm us. And it's worrisome. And,
and I think there's a part of that, but some of that, I have to be honest, is a little justified because you have to remember a lot of the parents that taught their kids that, they dealt with real racism. And it's hard to tell them, well, that doesn't exist anymore because, like I said, their perception's being created. And then you hear blacks now who say they're constantly harassed by cops. How are they supposed to trust cops?
But you say a lot of the parents out there now, a lot of the parents are 25.
Well, that's true.
To 30 years old.
That's true. There are younger ones, yes.
They did not experience racism.
But they were taught from their parents the same thing.
Exactly. So it's an ongoing, thing to where.
But you say they were not experienced racism, but I just played in the 7 o'clock hour Tim Scott, Republican senator, who talked about over and over he's profiled by cops for being black. How are we supposed to, say, well, don't have a negative perception of cops, and that keeps happening to them?
I don't think it's him personally. I mean, how does he?
You're right. It's not.
How does he not know that a white senator can drive around the same neighborhood and get pulled over at the same exact time all the time? How does he know?
Well, I think we would hear about it, but I understand your take. Thanks, Danny. But he got really defensive. Did you see what Danny did? He got very defensive of the cops there when I was just pointing out that maybe racial profiling does exist. And this is kind of my point. I'm not saying that it's all the white cops' fault when I say that. But I understand, at least partly, why blacks can get upset. But they're not looking at the facts. It doesn't mean they're being killed by cops on a regular basis. See, this is where it's stopped. We can't get defensive immediately on both sides because blacks get defensive. You criticize their community. You criticize the culture that's causing a lot of problems in their community. They get defensive. It's all white racism, racial injustice fault. And then you go to the other side and, well, they're not doing it personally. We have to defend the cops at all costs, no matter what, which I want to agree with. But when I hear a Republican senator, and I have many black friends who have this same experience, they're not lawbreakers, and over and over they tell me this happens to them, where's the solution? Seems like there's a middle ground here. But I just don't think it's going to be solved in my lifetime, I guess. Unfortunately, because perception on both sides has been reality. But if you want to get beyond perception, you need to listen to Beyond Reason Radio right here, because we get beyond perception and look at the truth, look at the facts, and look at reality, because I'm your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. Now, back to Beyond Reason Radio.
Yes, this is your host, Michael Yaffee. I do this show every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Mondays, it's exclusively on my app, BeyondReasonRadio.com and the Beyond Reason Radio app. Fridays, it's been on News Radio 102.5 WFLA from 7 to 9, and we've covered a lot of ground. If you missed any of the show, check out the podcast. Best way to do that, download the Beyond Reason Radio app. You can find it on iHeartRadio as well, so you can download that app. Or like me on Facebook. Go to Beyond Reason Radio on Facebook, or you can friend me. Search me and friend me. I don't care. I'll friend you. So I wanted to play another piece of audio here I thought was interesting between Eric Bolling and Juan Williams on the 5. And their exchange.
What about the police officer, the African-American officer that devoted his life,
We'll
and
just
it's
play
a
it.
family of law enforcement
Their
tradition
exchange
of
is telling
serving,
you.
that was in this horrible situation, that saw a gun that was recovered at the scene. Does he have a right to live?
Sure.
Does he have a
nobody-
right to defend himself?
Of course.
As well? This
But
is a
I think the
horrible,
question
tragic
is one of
situation,
accountability, Kimberly. Are police officers actually held accountable? Or is it the case that people like us, America's middle class, we say, you know what, thank God for the thin blue line. Keep those people over there. And if the officer is at fault, you know what, we're always going to give the officer the benefit of the doubt. We think police are pretty much good people.
I
and
don't
we're
give the
grateful for their
police
presence.
the benefit of the doubt. I was on the officer-involved shooting team for the San Francisco DA's office, and
officer in
prosecuted
Tulsa
officers
is
that committed
charged
acts.
already. I mean, I
That's
agree
in
with
Tulsa.
you.
That's in
Tulsa,
Tulsa.
right? In Tulsa. But a couple of quick numbers for you. Last year, 2015, there were 990 people killed by police. 494 were white, 258 were black.
Yeah.
This year so far, 324 white, 173 black.
Right, so
double the number of white people are killed by police.
This is total distortion. Come on.
Well, that's
24%.
it's actually the
I think the
Washington
number.
Post numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you something. 24% of the people being fatally shot by cops are black.
Yeah.
And if you compare the numbers in terms of black men, I've told you this before. 6% of Americans are black men, but about 40% of the people shot.
So the black population is about 13 or 14%.
Yeah,
of the
versus the
country,
24%.
And
That's
the 24
double.
number is higher than the black population.
That's what I'm saying.
But the crimes being committed by that population, it mirrors the number of crimes being committed by the white population. Numerically, it's people
Juan
are being
Williams
killed.
like never knew
White
that.
people are being killed at a higher rate numerically, just straight statistics, than black people. If you consider the number of crimes committed by blacks versus whites, they are.
So they both make valid points there, but see the defensiveness and the frustration. Juan Williams makes an interesting point that maybe cops should be held more accountable. Maybe we give them the benefit of the doubt too much. Although, I mean, look what happens when a cop shoots someone. They're immediately put on leave. They're immediately investigated. You have, you have cops charged. You had the one cop, I forget where it was now, where he shot the guy, the black man in the back, and the video came out. He was immediately charged with murder, probably go to jail. You have a cop in Tulsa charged. And so he tries to make the point there. That's a decent point. We should hold cops accountable. I don't think anybody would disagree with holding cops accountable. And yes, maybe we do give them the benefit of the doubt too much, but of course we're going to give a cop the benefit of the doubt because they, hold places of authority. But then Eric on the show makes a great point as well. Yes, whites are twice as more likely to be killed by a cop than blacks. Oh, well, that's disproportional. Well, the fact is, blacks are more likely to kill cops than whites. Blacks commit more violent crimes than whites. So, and he said those facts to Juan Williams, and it was like Juan Williams never heard that before. What? What do you mean? And he got so defensive about it. And then when you say to some people, those are the facts, so that means maybe cops are going to deal with blacks more because they're committing more crimes, they'll tell you, well, they're not committing more crimes, it's just institutional racism, yada, yada, yada. And we're not talking about drug offenses, which they do, but violent crimes. And so you can't ignore both sides here, but is that not exactly what happened? They both got defensive. There could have been a real discussion there, but immediately Juan Williams said that's distortion. It's not distortion, it's fact. And actually with the facts in that Washington Post show as well, the overwhelming majority of the time when a cop shoots someone, that person they shot was armed. No matter if they're white, black, Hispanic, whatever. The overwhelming majority of the time. Doesn't that make a difference? And then we say, well, cops should be trained to shoot in the arm. That's so much easier said than done. And we had a cop make a point earlier in the show that if you train them that way, you're going to have more dead cops, basically. Because as soon as they get that gun up and you see the smoke in the barrel, you're dead. It's easier said than done. And cops have a hard job. Maybe their job is a lot harder than we realize. But we have to come together and come up with solutions. In the middle here. Let me get a call real quick from Dale. You got about a minute, Dale, but go ahead.
Well, I want to make a comment about Juan Williams. The reason why he was getting so defensive is he's just like Jesse Jackson. He doesn't like the narrative because it doesn't push, his agenda. His agenda is he wants blacks to feel like they're suffering in America, and he wants to put blame on people. He doesn't want to hear the facts that there were more whites killed than blacks. That doesn't fit his narrative. And another thing, if you listen to 2 points that he made, he said he called himself in the middle class. Juan Williams is not in the middle class. He is way in the upper echelon of the classes, if you want to put people in economic, social classes. And another thing is he's just a very arrogant person. I mean, I can't stand to listen to that guy.
Well, okay, and I appreciate your call on that. I mean, I don't know. Juan Williams, I don't hate him. He's made some great points on school choice. He has been all for school choice and is tired of the Obama administration getting rid of school choice because it helps the black community. So, I mean, I can't say he's as bad as some of the Black Lives Matter stuff in this situation. But I agree, he's a liberal. There's no doubt about it. But see, we have calls today that prove this. We get so defensive on both sides instead of really coming up with real solutions here. But I think that's where we are here. I understand. I think a lot of times perception is reality on both sides. When I listen, I've said this a bunch of times now, when I listen to Tim Scott say he's racially profiled over and over, then I cannot discount that. That's going to create a bad perception in his mind about cops. But if cops are dealing with more black criminals, that's going to create a perception in his mind about blacks. It's not necessarily racist. It's just reality. It's what happens. So until we get to a point where whites admit we need to get rid of some of the racism and blacks admit we need to clean up our black communities, we're never going to get anywhere. And if we keep just pointing sides and get extra defensive on both sides, we're never going to solve anything. And I want to end the show with a different verse that I've talked about before. And I think it's really prescient on this. And it's from Matthew chapter 7. And this verse is really about putting your, walking in someone else's shoes. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. I think that says it all right there. Maybe the true answer is Jesus. I know, what a crazy Christian throwing that out there. I appreciate y'all listening. If you missed any of the show, check the podcast. We had a good show. Let's get back to the truth here. Maybe come together. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. I'll catch you guys next time.
That nothing comes from indifference. I look inside.